channel. Today we're going to cover the legend of Rudy, one of the more requested subjects that I've been asked to cover. So stay tuned, we're going on a deep dive of all things Rude Dog. Rude Dog's a great friend of mine, pretty close to brother level stuff. Got to keep this a little bit clean, but I'm not going to be totally easy on him either. So if you've seen this guy around town or around the Starved Rock area, Illinois Valley, it's not a surprise. I really think he really brings in tourists and bonds with the tourist. I think he's the closest thing we have to a tourist attraction. I was going to start out by kind of giving some little-known facts about Rudy versus just jumping into the amazing stories. So first, Reverend Rude Dog is a licensed minister, and he could perform your marriage either on a ship or wherever, because he's a licensed minister. He signed my marriage certificate. He jumps the annual polar plunge for charity. He went to a small private Catholic high school that I probably couldn't get into. That's probably only funny if you know us both personally. There's some irony in there. Rudy has a third sibling who's rarely discussed. And then also interesting, Rudy has a CDL but does not truck, only boats. Also, Rudy has a tattoo that misspells his name. And I know you're thinking, oh, misspelling Schlenk wouldn't be that tough. Oh no, it misspells his first name, and it's on his arm. All right, let's dive into the great stories. So the one I wanted to start out with, and these are really in no particular order, is the dog mascot motorcycle incident. So we used to have an arcade in town. I think it was called Too Much Fun or some variation of that. And this arcade had a mascot. Well, eventually Rudy took the mascot for rides on his motorcycle around town, and then eventually wore the giant dog suit around on the motorcycle and was pulled over and given some citations. I do believe Leno talked about that, or that might have been in the Carson days. It was discussed on a late night show, but I can't seem to find any evidence of it, and it could have been a second tier one, but really funny stuff if you were there to see him get pulled over driving this giant dog mascot motorcycle through downtown Ottawa. Really something to see. The next story I'd like to cover is the frozen Halloween calamity. So the year would be 1996, possibly 97, and Rudy decides he's going to come down to our Halloween party in college, but it's quite chilly. So he rides through the frozen weather to get there on a motorcycle, calls me from a near downtown, DeSoto, I believe, a nearby town, and I come up and get him because he hadn't been to the house before. That weekend, he proceeded to attend our college party and bong Mad Dog through a beer bong and then throw up pretty much all over the basement. It was really great. It was something to watch. Hey guys, meet Rudy. He came down in the frost on his motorcycle, and then his response when everybody's really liking him is to projectile vomit after bonging Mad Dog on stage. Thank you. Next, we cover misadventures in love. And I'm speaking directly to Rudy when I say to you, I'm going to take it easy on you in this chapter, my man. But I'm going to cover it at a high level. I kind of put all the little love stories of years past into a small box that we can't cover in, which is ironic, which we can't cover in major detail, But here are some highlights. So Rudy dates a woman who loses her man on their honeymoon boat, and then Rudy refuses to get off the boat that he acquires with this woman, and then ironically loses that woman, kind of because of that. I don't know. I could have really got to do a lot of editing there, as far as out of his actual life. next one is very, very public displays of affection at his bar of choice. I just gotta leave that one alone too, and it's too bad. Historically speaking, he is willing to kiss you if you're a lady and he's single at the time, and you're like stumbling and puking all over Don's one stop. Even if you're like knocking things over and stuff, he's still gonna go ahead and work the angle he can. And then a quote about one of Rudy's first girlfriends. We asked him, "Well, that's nice. You got a girlfriend. Is she pretty?" He said no. So we said, "Oh, she's nice then." And again, he said no. And it's too bad I can't go further into that. But what a great quote. I think that really sums it up in the areas of funny love stories there. So I'm not going to dwell for too long on the Great Canadian Road Trip because I know I've kind of covered it in another video. But the highlights of this, it would have been still probably late 90s. He decides to drive to Canada in a blizzard with no coat. We only had one album, Jimmy Buffett's Greatest Hits. We listened to it over and over. We decided we didn't want to ask directions from somewhere boring because we might wind up somewhere boring, which is a stupid idea. So we asked some guys that were fishing in the ice on the way there. We did take a shortcut around Detroit, but we almost hit a washing machine that was laying right around an interstate. So that was interesting. And then when we got into Canada, he puked Molson onto the sidewalk and heckled some store clerks about having no Canadian food that we could order. No delicacy. They tried to tell us Haagen-Dazs was. And then when we got back to the hotel, he dismantled the hotel room furniture in protest to where it was in pieces for him. And the other high point there was he, on the way back, we stopped and asked an American convenience store clerk directions, and she didn't know where she was. And we were like, okay, how do you get to work every day if you don't know where you're at? Anyway, it's an interesting moment on the journey, so thank you. So, the real estate bubble. Rudy was in on it. He had a giant condominium on the 32nd or 33rd story or something at 33 Ontario, downtown Chicago, and it was occupied by a couple rowdy buddies of mine who rented, one of them had a graduate degree, one of them's a high-ranking, corporate guy. And they rented, it's an expensive place. Rudy was their landlord. That was back when, if you, had a pulse and a buddy that was a mortgage broker, you could figure stuff out, I guess. But anyway, it was a blast to party there. Not a blast to clean it, but an absolute blast to party there. And Rudy was, big baller there for a while, and that was it was great if you were there to watch it. It is also worthy to note that Rudy once jogged from Pearl Street all the way to the high school, buck naked, and grabbed proof that he did it, and then ran back to the hot tub that we were sitting in. So that was good, probably 3/4 of a mile round trip run naked through the streets of Ottawa, circa 90-something. It's about as specific as I can remember on that one. When we were around 20 or 21 years old, we lived in Nashville, and Rudy lived in my basement because the room I thought I was going to give him got taken by somebody else. And when he was down there, it was an unfurnished basement, by the way. He had to keep a salt shaker by his bed because of the slugs, and he would just throw salt on a slug when he saw one, but he pretty much just lived in the basement and entertained a lot of guests down there like it was just no thing. It was really something to watch, but yeah, there were slugs. So, we obviously need to close with boating stories for doing a Rudy documentary here. So, Rudy's, the best boater I've ever seen, but every boater has some moments out there. I'm going to put this very gently because I know I'm putting the curse on myself by even bringing this up, but on like 4th of July night, when it's heavily patrolled, did donuts under the bridge on like 4th of July at like a high speed, and I, had to talk to law about it or whatever. I don't think it was any huge deal, but just I think it's just a funny thing. Yeah, the dog was there. He barked. So another thing Rudy does out there is he put a giant inflatable snake in the bathroom of my boat. So I went to open it one time, and it almost gave me a heart attack. And then he followed that up by doing the same thing with the giant Santa as well. It could scare the death out of you, but it's pretty funny at the time. One time it flooded a lot, so we just boated up me on the boat, just boated up the flooded Fox all the way to the Dayton Dam, which is pretty cool. Then there's the mooning incident. The mooning incident was awesome. So earlier that day, there was only 1 or 2 of us on the boat, and we mooned Rudy. And then he saw us later that night and didn't realize that we had picked up like little kids and my parents and stuff. And he mooned us, and yeah, he didn't know. He felt bad, but it was pretty hilarious because if you've ever seen Rudy like that, it can be a very scary thing. Anyway, he once took the people have heard me talk about the boat on fire incident in Lake Michigan. He was the mechanic for that boat. He's much better at it now. Much better than I was. Much better than I am at it anyway, so take it with a grain of salt, Rudy. But he took this 13-hour boat ride where he had to go up the sewage canal. It was really something, all the way to Chicago. So that's how it got in Lake Michigan to get on fire, a month later or whatever. There was somebody else, an old friend of ours from kindergarten, has the name. I shouldn't name his name. First name Brian. How about that? Anyway, he got out of the boat halfway. He only made it to Joliet. He was like, "F this." So I mean, it was a pretty hardy mission. And then for those of you that know Rudy, and if you're there when he's overserved, he does make that great noise where he goes, "I can't do it." I might try to insert a sound into this later, but I don't know. I might lose viewers over that. But he says, I, only louder and in a much higher pitch. So anyway, that's about it. I like to give the disclaimer that there's a lot of stories that aren't appropriate for sharing, and some of these had to be scrubbed up a little, and some great stuff had to be left off the list. But this covers the meat and potatoes of it. So hope you enjoyed the video. Let the legend of Rudy live on.